Now there you're watching L24 Midnight News, streaming live from the capital Algiers, and to the headlines. In another campaign of arrest by the Zionist occupation forces, 2 Palestinians were injured Wednesday morning south of Jenin in the West Bank. "19 people have been killed in a twin car bombing in the central Somalia claimed by a Shabab terrorist group. In Europe, Russia's defense ministry stated that 89 servicemen were killed in the Ukrainian attack on Mekayivka in Donetsk region, adding that the main reason for the attack was unauthorized use of mobile phones by the troops. In USA, Republican Kevin McCarthy fell short a third time in his bid for House Speaker as 20 Republicans rejected his candidacy and backed the other Republican, Jim Jordan. Starting by the local matter, the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, received on Wednesday in the capital Algiers the President of the Movement of Society for Peace, Mr. Abdelrazak Al-Makri. In a statement to the press following his meeting with the President of the Republic, Mr. Makri expressed his wish to see everyone cooperate in the interest of Algeria and ensure the preservation of the strength and firmness of the Algerian state, regardless of their opinions and ideas.
في لقاء سابق مع السيد الرئيس كان أخبرني بأن أبواب
Mr. President already told me that his doors were open to discussions and dialogue with parties, personalities, and all those who aspire to a general partnership in the interest of the nation. I met with the President of the Republic to express some points of view on the political and economic issues, as well as certain observations relating to several fields and files. Actually, the meeting with the President of the Republic was good and open and characterized by a comfortable exchange. I personally benefited a lot from all what he said regarding economic questions, and I also expressed several points of view. It is a civilized behavior, and we commend the existence of a relationship between the opposition and the authorities, particularly at the level of the Presidency of the Republic.
The United Nations Security Council will hold an emergency session today, Thursday, to discuss Zionist violation of the status quo in Al-Quds and specifically at Al-Aqsa Mosque. Riyad Mansour, the permanent representative of the State of Palestine to the United Nations, said that the session will discuss the Zionist entity's violations in Al-Quds, especially in the wake of storming of the Holy Al-Aqsa Mosque compound by the Zionist entity's Minister of National Security. The Zionist army killed 2 Palestinian men during a raid on a village near Jenin in the northern occupied West Bank. At least 3 others were injured during the same raid, including one in critical condition. Nabil Khazini on What Follow.
It was always meant to be delicate and provocative, and he knew that. The far-right minister Ben-Gvir walked with his own feet to a wave of condemnations from the 4 corners of the entire world after he decided to sneak into the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Several countries and organizations have expressed their rejection of him storming the courtyards of the third of the holiest shrines in Islam and called on the occupation authorities to stop the provocative and unacceptable escalation.
Ben-Gvir is dangerous because he has the idea to control Al-Aqsa. He has the idea to divide both time of prayers and territory.
We take it seriously when the extremist minister Ben-Gvir breaks into the Al-Aqsa compound, because that will affect the situation, and we consider this breaking in as an official Israeli invitation to a round of violence in the field that will be hard to control.
The condemnations came not only from Arab and Muslim countries, but the step was also criticized from Western countries and organizations such as the European Union, the UK and the United States, All agreed that such a move can have some heavy consequences and is a challenge to the international community.
The United States stands firmly, and we've been very clear for preservation of the status quo with respect to the holy sites in Jerusalem. Any unilateral action that jeopardizes the status quo is unacceptable, and we will continue to be steadfast on that and be very clear on that.
In addition to that, the occupation forces are continuing their aggression against the Palestinian citizens. In the West Bank, 2 Palestinians were wounded following a raid of the occupation forces, who have arrested another 11 in what seems to be a continuation of violent acts following a year believed to be among the deadliest in Palestine in the last decades.
And from the Middle East to Africa, Tunisia's central bank chief said that his country faces a year of economic growth, skyrocketing inflation and needs of bailout deal with the International Monetary Fund. Tunisia reached an agreement with the global lender for a bailout package worth around $2 billion, but it's still expecting an approval and a final agreement with the IMF.
The problem today is that 2023 is going to be a complicated year if we do not reach an agreement with the IMF in terms of mobilizing external financing and even domestic financing. I think we have reached relatively high levels. We hope to be able as soon as possible to reach an agreement with the Monetary Fund to mobilize the external financing put into the budget.
And from Tunisia to Libya, the head of the government of National Unity, Abdelhamid Dbeibah, stressed the need to build a system in the country that would restore stability to all institutions and distribute their power based on the law that would solve their problems. Abdelhamid Dbeibah called on the Libyan youth to mobilize and serve the country, each from their position, to achieve what is expected from all the Libyans.
In some Arab countries, problems are solved through the council, the head of state or the chief who form councils to solve issues. We must build a system. Nobody should do favors to others. If the citizen needs a service, it's our duty to all to do it. In this state, we should take care of the citizen. If he has a problem, we should stand by him. Everyone has the responsibility to solve the citizen's problems.
Moroccan Observatory Against Normalization accused King Mohammed VI's advisor André Azoulay of seeking to sabotage the Kingdom of Morocco to make it a state belonging to the Zionist entity, stressing that Moroccan Prime Minister personally implements this plan. Situation in Morocco today may drag the state into an imminent social explosion due to the popular rejection of normalization of political strong ties with the Zionist entity.
He's behaving as Zionist general resident in Morocco. He reminds us the days of the French colonization. So when he says unification of structures and the establishment of twins, this means that he's linking Morocco with the Zionist entity as if it was an annex. They are using this agenda to impose the reality that Morocco is no longer a sovereign state and that the Moroccan flag is no longer representing the Moroccan sovereignty. And it always needs the Zionist flag beside it in order to protect it.
Malian authorities announced on Tuesday that 5 people, 2 firefighters and 3 civilians had been killed in an armed attack that targeted the first aid center in Marca, Congo, in the southeast of the country. Attacks are rare in the region, but Mali, a landlocked country in the Sahel region, has been witnessing a decade-long violence insurgency that has spread to its neighbors Niger and Burkina Faso. Togolese President Faure Gnassingbe arrived in the Malian capital Bamako on Wednesday afternoon for a 24-hour visit, during which he will try to persuade the ruling Transitional Council to release the Ivorian soldiers who had been convicted a few days ago of sentences extending from 20 years in prison to death. Congo's president's visit coincided with the passage of 96 hours since the end of the deadline given by the ECOWAS group for the release of Ivorian soldiers. The death toll from a two-car bomb attack on Wednesday in Hiran region, central Somalia, rose to 35, which was confirmed by a senior police official. A Shabab movement in Somalia claimed responsibility for the bombing. Eyewitnesses said that people far from the site of the explosion were injured by flying shrapnel, and several houses were destroyed in the vicinity of the explosion. Coming back to Asia, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad had received United Arab Emirates Foreign Minister in Damascus on Wednesday. According to WAM news agency, the meeting addressed development in Syria and the wider Middle East. Syrian state news agency said both leaders discussed regional and international developments and economic relations. According to the Turkish National Defense Minister, Turkey and Russia may establish joint patrols in northern Syria as part of new security arrangements. Turkish National Defense Minister Hulusi Akar said the goal of the planned joint patrol is to defend Turkey from any threats of terrorism and to limit more arrival of refugees. The Russian President Vladimir Putin Wednesday sent a frigate of 2 Atlantic Ocean armed with hypersonic Zircon cruise missiles. In a video conference, Vladimir Putin said that the ship was armed with hypersonic weapons. Russia, China, the United States are in a race to develop hypersonic missiles, which are seen as a way to gain an edge over any adversary because of their speeds about 5 times the speed of sound.
This time the ship is equipped with the latest hypersonic missile system Zircon, which has no equivalent. This is a hypersonic sea-based system and other new weapons. As I have said already, there is no equivalent in any country in the world. I'm sure that this powerful weapon will allow Russia to protect itself from potential external threats and will help us serve our country's national interests.
Moscow announced that 89 of its military personnel were killed on New Year's Eve in a Ukrainian missile strike that targeted the center in Makayivka, eastern Ukraine. Hassan Burkan tackled the story in this report.
It is the largest toll in a single attack recognized by Moscow since the start of the Russian operation in Ukraine. 89 Russian military personnel were killed on New Year's Eve in Ukrainian missile strike that targeted their position in Makivka, in the east of the country. According to the Russian authorities, Kyiv was able to monitor and target the soldiers after they violated the instructions and used their mobile phones.
At the present time, a commission is working to investigate the circumstances of the incident, but it is already obvious that the main reason for what happened was the switching on and mass use by personnel contrary to the ban in place of mobile phones in a strike zone accessible to enemy weapons. This factor allowed the enemy to track and determine the coordinates of the soldiers' location for a missile strike.
As a retaliation, Russian forces launched intense bombing of several cities in the Donbas region. The Russian Minister of Defense announced the elimination of hundreds of Ukrainian soldiers, whom it described as foreign mercenaries during the military operation carried out by Russian army, in addition to the destruction of 4 American HIMARS missile launchers. The debates about the field situation and the difficulties faced by the Russian forces moved to a more intense stage, with the recognition of the founder of the Wagner military group, the ferocity of the battles, and the level of Ukrainian defenses.
It's a fortress in every house. That's why our guys fight sometimes for several days, sometimes for several weeks, for only one house. Such defense lines. How many defense lines are there in Artemovsk well? If we say 500, we can't be wrong, can we? Every 10 meters, there is a line of defense.
The Wagner Group, whose military activity has always been kept very secretive, plays a major role in the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, along with volunteer units of fighters in the Ahmed brigades of the Chechen President Ramzan Kadyrov.
The Chinese President Xi Jinping has offered to open talks on joint gas and oil exploration deal with Philippines, as he pledged to make relations with Manila a diplomatic priority. Xi was speaking to his Philippines counterpart Ferdinand Marcos Jr., who was on a 3-day visit to the Chinese capital, Beijing. On Wednesday, Kevin McCarthy's hopes of becoming the Speaker of the House were rapidly fading as California congressman lost on a historic 6th ballot in the face of persistent opposition from hardline faction of the Republican Party. Miriam Zian.
The U.S. House of Representatives has failed to elect a new speaker for the 6th time in 2 days in a historic floor fight. The Republican Kevin McCarthy failed to secure enough support to win the U.S. House speakership, set in the chamber for a 6th round of votes plunging the party into further chaos. Despite Donald Trump's broad support and an intervention encouraging Republicans to rally around McCarthy, 20 Republicans voted against him and nominated Republican lawmaker Byron Donalds of Florida instead on Wednesday afternoon.
The Honorable Kevin McCarthy of the state of California has received 201. The Honorable Byron Donalds of the state of Florida has received 20.
Meanwhile, Democrats are standing firm. For every ballot, they have nominated Representative Hakeem Jeffries for Speaker. The U.S. President Joe Biden called the House proceedings a little embarrassing on Wednesday morning. The House cannot conduct any business until a new Speaker is elected by a majority of members, and the situation has left the Congress paralyzed, as no rules can be adopted until a new Speaker is chosen. The House Speaker will be second in line for the U.S. presidency after the Vice President, but how many rounds of votes will it take the House of Representatives to elect its leader?
85 migrants saved at the sea by the NGO vessel GU Balance disembarked in the port of Taranto a week after Italy's right-wing coalition government approved plans to banish charities who rescue migrants at sea. The order mandates that following a rescue, charity ships should request a port and proceed there without delay, as opposed to continuing to search for other migrant boats in need of assistance. Thousands of Peruvians took to the streets on Tuesday calling for peace a day before fresh protest is expected following clashes caused by the ouster of former President Pedro Castillo left almost 24 dead in December. The demonstration, dubbed the Great March for Peace, was initially backed by the national police, but officers withdrew their support after left-wing politicians and local human rights organizations raised concerns about a conflict of interest. The government issued a state of emergency when violent protests first erupted in December, sending security forces into protest areas.
What we demand is the end of deaths on the people's side and on the police side. Honestly, they're having us Peruvian brothers kill each other. This can't happen. How are we going to allow this to happen in the world we're living in? We're in the 21st century, and these things still occur.
Still in the South American continent, Colombia suspended a ceasefire with National Liberation Army rebels on Wednesday, and in about face after a left-wing guerrilla group said it had not agreed to halt fighting. The reversal, less than 4 days after the initial announcement, is set back for plans by President Gustavo Petro to bring peace to the country after nearly 60 years of conflict, which has claimed more than 450,000 lives. Petro announced the 6-month ceasefire late on New Year's Eve, also including crime gangs such as the Clan del Golfo and dissident groups run by former members of the now demobilized FARC rebels.
¿Cuál es el objeto de la suspensión?
What is the purpose of the suspension? It is to give the necessary time to verify at the negotiating table the protocols to be agreed upon in order to duly implement the bilateral ceasefire. Only when we have the conditions of the protocols totally agreed, then we can lift the suspension, and it will come into full effect. In the meantime, the military and police forces retain full powers in the offensive against the National Liberation Army.
And now for international news, let's follow this roundup by Mohammed Khatal.
Hundreds of Iraqis gathered for a protest in front of the central bank on Wednesday, calling for the government to intervene to regulate the exchange rate of the Iraqi dinar against the US dollar. Exchange prices in the black market have hit high records of 158,000 dinars for each 100 US dollars. Meanwhile, the exchange rate in the central bank was kept at 146,000 dinars for each 100 US dollars. The fluctuating rates and the currency devaluation has triggered inflation waves that had a strong impact on the market. The Iraqi economy has been struggling to tackle the fallout from years of war and rampant corruption. A 10-year-old Vietnamese boy who fell into the narrow open shaft of a concrete pile at a construction site on New Year's Eve has been confirmed dead, state media said on Wednesday. Rescuers spent nearly 100 hours trying to free Ly Hao Nam from the 35-meter-long support pillar driven into the ground, but without success. Nam fell into the hollow concrete pile, which has a diameter of 25 centimeters, on Saturday at a bridge construction site in the Mekong Delta province, where he had been searching with friends for scrap iron. Demonstrators gathered in front of the headquarters of the press club in Dakar to demand the release of journalist Pape Ali Niang, sent to prison 2 weeks ago for information likely to harm national defense. And since then, he went on hunger strike. The director of Reporters Without Borders in West Africa is concerned to see the freedom of the press in Senegal in danger and threatened. Niang, widely followed in Senegal for his regular columns on current affairs, was released on December 14 but sent back to prison a week later. He has been on a hunger strike since his latest imprisonment on December 20th. Myanmar's government held a parade on Wednesday to celebrate the country's 75th Independence Day in the capital Naypyidaw amid conflict with opposition groups across the country. Speaking at the parade, Myanmar's chief Min Aung Hlaing accused some countries of trying to intervene in his country's affairs while thanking others, including India and China, for their cooperation and support. The Southeast Asian country has faced international isolation and Western-led sanctions since the military seized power from a democratically elected government led by Nobel laureate Aung San Suu Kyi nearly 2 years ago.
Coming back to Algeria, after successfully hosting the Mediterranean Games last summer, Iran now is preparing to host another series of football games at the iconic stadium Medoud Hedfi. This time, the capital of Algeria's west will host the group stages of the 7th edition of the African Cup of Nations of Locals CHAN 2023 tournament, including an important scene at the quarter-final and the semi-finals. More in this report.
After its success in hosting the Mediterranean Games, as witnessed by the continental federations and the participants from all over the Mediterranean region, Oran, capital of the West, is preparing once again to host another major sport event. This time, the new Oran Olympic Stadium, Medoud Hedfi, the integrated sport complex in the western part of the country, with a capacity of 40,000 spectators, will be one of the 4th stadiums to hold CHAN 2023, slated in Algeria between the 13th of January and the 4th of February, by receiving the largest number of matches in the tournament, with a total of 10 games, 7 of which will be within the group stages of the 4th and the 5th or DE groups, in addition to a match in the quarter-finals, semi-finals and a third-place match. Al-Bahiya's biggest stadium, Milud Hetfi, is considered as a world-class facility. With a naturally grass-filled floor, it has a modern watering system that is linked to the meteorological station to automatically adjust the data, a technique that was used for the first time in the African continent. This sports complex is also equipped with high-resolution surveillance cameras, 4 guard posts and a car parking with a capacity of 1,500 cars. Away from the stadium and the delegations that will be present in Oran, you will find a vast city with its distinctive tourist and cultural areas. The charm of Oran remains an unforgettable legacy. This is a city that used to be beating hard for the mini rehearsal of the African Cup, and the ultimate goal remains to win Algeria the honor of organizing the African Cup of Nations AFCON 2025.
And with Iran, we close the chapter of News Bulletin. Thank you ever so much for being with us. For more updates, you can follow our social media platform. And for now, good night.